It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? We're about to run down the daily news here. These are the headlines for Canada, specifically hailing out of Ontario. So every morning we check out what's going on in the Globe and Mail, and we try to put a little spin on some of these mainstream news stories that we see. So I thought this one is pretty fun. I've been keeping up to date a little bit about the James Webb Telescope. So this one is saying a space telescope uncovers massive galaxies near cosmic dawn. I don't know what cosmic dawn means personally, but essentially it is saying that some of these galaxies pictured here, I believe they are these red dots, could contain as many stars as our present day Milky Way. um, in one case, the one in the bottom left here could be 30 times more compact. So these are each galaxies that are very, very far away, a la Star Wars. So who knows what kind of business is going on over in those galaxies. While most galaxies are in this era are still small and only gradually grow larger over time, there are a few monsters that fast track to maturity. Why is this the case, or how this would work is unknown. So basically, this is kind of like a new scientific discovery, in so much as it's adding skepticism into what is widely accepted as like the Big Bang theory as to how galaxies form and all of that. So the revelation that massive galaxy formation began extremely early in the history of the universe upends what many of us had thought was settled, says Joel Leja from Pennsylvania State University. Um, it turns out we found something so unexpected, it actually creates problems for science. It calls the whole picture of early galaxy formation into question. So, this is pretty interesting. It sounds like maybe as a result of this new technology, the James Webb telescope that uses infrared vision, it sounds like they might have maybe uncovered a new explanation for how the universe was formed. So this is pretty interesting. Scientists hope to eventually observe the first stars and galaxies formed following the creation of the universe 13.8 billion years ago. So interesting, interesting. I love hearing these updates and seeing the pictures that come out of the James Webb telescope. So maybe we'll learn more about the universe. But bringing it back down to Earth, the weather is wacky in Ontario. We are getting some snow, and if we ask chat what the weather is like, maybe we could get a quick update. What is the weather like where you are, chat? We know if you're in Ontario, we're getting a lot of snow. I had to wake up early to shovel the driveway because I'm a good partner. What can I say? And hundreds of flights are canceled. We might even get some more snow later today. Krista Freeland is now beating the war drum. It's as the daily war drum for Canada beats. I guess today's story about China is that Krista Freeland is ringing national security alarm about founders of Canadian bank with suspected ties to China. Sorry, not ties to China. It's ties to China. Yeah. So yeah, this seems to just be like what people are talking about today in terms of like China bad. So there are some bankers who are part of a bank who might have ties to China. It's crazy, I know. So apparently this is a national security concern about Wealth One Bank of Canada. Krista Freeland saying that three of its founding shareholders could be susceptible to Chinese government coercion, according to two sources. So I honestly barely even know what any of that means. I read this whole article and I'm still trying to figure out what the story really is. The shareholders are also facing allegations from other Canadian financial institutions that have engaged in money laundering, according to a letter sent by Miss Freeland and three individuals late last year. So The bank, Wealth One Bank of Canada, which caters to Chinese Canadians. Yeah, they might, there's Chinese people who are part of this bank. Two of the founders, Mr. Xian and Mr. Wu Yang, have property and investments in China. According to the information recently taken down from the Wealth One website, again, I'm not really sure why this matters, but a letter from Mrs. Freeland expresses concern that the three shareholders, including, I guess, another person, could be vulnerable to coercion from China. It also says that the government believes you may have been involved in financial activities that other regulated institutions have assessed provided reasonable grounds to suspect such transactions are related to the commission of money laundering. So obviously, if there's money laundering going on, that's a big deal, and that they should crack down on that. I guess it doesn't really explain how this all relates back to China, other than the fact that some of these people are from China and own property in China. So in my opinion, I don't know what would stop anyone from being a potential person who could be coerced by the Chinese government. Like, just because these people are Chinese. And again, I we don't know the full story, and maybe there is more, but a lot of what is coming out about this is like, hey, we can't actually say anything about this. So the bank itself is saying, we are a Canadian bank with an independent board of directors and an executive leadership team of banking professionals who have extensive experience in operations under the Canadian banking regulatory framework and who are fully aware of the need for the highest standards of integrity and regulatory compliance. So, that sounds like what probably any bank or corporation is going to say. And again, like, I have no love for these people, these one percenters, these rich people who sit on the board of a bank. But I do, I am a bit concerned about the tensions rising between Canada and China and Russia and the U.S. and all of that. So I do want to have a bit of skepticism when it comes to stories like this. The Minister of Finance, Krista Freeland, takes very seriously her responsibility for the security and stability of the Canadian financial sector. As Minister of Finance, she is empowered to act to address risks to any bank in Canada, Mr. Lawrence said, who is the Communications Director for Krista Freeland. Given her role as a regulator, it would be inappropriate to comment on any specific institution or any specific regulatory process that may be underway. So that was the really frustrating thing about this article. It was like making these accusations that there may be a national security problem going on, but we can't say specifically what it is. So that is like, this is why I think it's, more of the beating the war drums. And this is again coming from Robert Fife and Stephen Chase, who literally have been publishing a story of that, an anti-China story, like every day since I think last Friday, consistently, and probably even beyond that, but maybe just not like every day. So in more federal news here, Ottawa paid out more than $37 billion in pandemic wage subsidies to businesses with tax debts. This is kind of like part of what must be an ongoing thing with the CRA, because we've heard a little bit more about this yesterday as well, in regards to another program that was being rolled out during the pandemic. So the CEWS was paid directly to employers experiencing significant revenue declines during the pandemic as a way of helping them keep employees on the payroll. The fact that billions went to companies with tax or insolvency problems exposes issues with the program's design, given that many of the businesses were already struggling for reasons unrelated to COVID-19 and were not likely able to maintain their staffing levels. Yeah, so this was a huge problem. It was basically like, hey, we need this money for pandemic relief, and instead of going where it needed to go, it went to businesses that had already dug their own grave, essentially. And instead of maintaining those staffing levels, they ended up, having the problems that they had already created for themselves and losing a lot of their staff. Unfortunately, of course, because of the way this world works and the way our government kind of rushed to get this money out the door. It ended up going to a lot of like larger businesses. Surprise, surprise. About 8.2 billion in CEWS payments went to 260 companies with between 1,000 and 5,000 employees each. And 68% of that amount, covering 85 businesses, is under CRA audit. So actually, this is, I guess, good in a way because it means that the CRA is kind of directing their energy towards people who have, the wealthiest of these cases. Like, I don't like to see when the CRA is cracking down on people who accessed CERB. A lot of those people needed it, and maybe whether they were eligible or not, they might have difficulty paying it back. So I think this trying to go after this 8.2 billion is a better use of their resources. Obviously, it's a bigger chunk of money, so go after it. A further 2.4 billion went to 24 companies with over 5,000 employees each, and the agency is auditing 10 businesses representing 68% of that amount. So yeah, really hoping that the CRA can claw back some of these like billions of dollars. So that's kind of what we want to hear, is making sure that the pandemic resources went to people who needed it, not these big businesses. Bill Morneau, who was finance minister when the government launched CEWS, said that basically it was more about having a rubber stamp and making sure that money went out the door rather than raising his concerns about the fiscal matters. And so I guess he feels like he was kind of like brushed aside. There was only revision to my recommendations, he said, ever upward toward funding levels that the Prime Minister's office believed would play well the next time Canada went to the polls. So I guess he feels like he got pushed aside and his concerns were not taken seriously. Canada's foreign home buyer ban slows rental housing construction. So this is another thing I have a bit of mixed feelings about. I think, having foreign purchases of residential property is a problem we've faced here in Canada. It is something that is contributing to the housing crisis, especially in major city centers like Vancouver and Toronto. This has been a particular problem. However, now they are saying that a lot of developments cannot go through because they need that foreign funding. And under these new rules, you're not allowed to have more than 3% of foreign funding. So according to Clemens Sells, who is the president of Toronto-based Colonia Truhan Limited Group, the bottom line is that we're stuck. Which again, this is not a group of people that I have any love for, wealthy developers. But I am someone who believes that, we are in the middle of a housing crisis. We need medium density housing to be built. And, we need to properly incentivize the people who do have the resources to build that stuff, to actually build it. Ribbert in chat is saying there's nothing done for residents who own multiple properties. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. But yeah. So Mr. Sells here is saying, I cannot fund it with European equity, he said. There's a lot of planning for a long time in this, and now comes this law and it screws up the whole thing. So basically he's saying like, he can't go through with his developments. I'm not crying that many tears for him personally. I think it would be better if we were incentivizing people who want to own these properties instead of people who want to rent out these properties. I don't know. I just don't have any love for these developers if they are relying on foreign funding. But it only is like 3%. Like, that is not that much. But also, I wish there was a way to get these projects built, and encourage the people who are going to live in them to be part owners of them as well. To me, this is all just like a racket that is prioritizing the very wealthy and people who are going to own these properties, these apartments or condos, and rent them out in an exploitative way. So I'm not really crying any tears for these developers. The foreign buyer ban is attracting attention in other countries, particularly the US, where many citizens have bought property in Canada over the years. So US Congressman Brian Higgins from New York said he believes the new ban violates Canada's trade agreement with the US and Mexico, as well as long-standing tax treaties. And this is an unnecessary burden and bad faith action by the government of Canada. So yeah, I guess that is a bit of a concern because the Canada and the U.S. obviously have a more special relationship than Canada and the European countries or China. So it's confusing. It's one of those things like I feel like I don't have the proper nuance to properly dissect because I want that housing built. I want the housing crisis to be solved, but at the same time, I don't want it solved in a way that only benefits the very wealthy. So mixed feelings, and I would love to have an expert come on if you're out there and would love to come on the show and talk to us about this. That would be fantastic to know like what is the real way forward through a more equitable process. So this I found really interesting. Police involved fatal incidents are on the rise in Canada despite promises to curb violence. So as we had learned the other day, the police funding in Canada is increasing, surprise, surprise, and transit is being defunded. Part of that defunding of transit is also a response to people saying that there's been more attacks and they feel less safe on places like Toronto Transit. However, the data does not back that up. There are not necessarily more attacks on Toronto Transit. However, these incidents are being more widely reported on. And instead of investing in transit, the Toronto City Council is investing in police to police transit. So it's really, really disappointing. But in this case, now there is data coming out saying that police killings are on the rise in Canada. And what do we do instead of instead of defunding the police, we give the police more and more money. So unfortunately, police are in this position of power where no matter what happens, whether they act really badly or do a fantastic job, they get more funding. Because when they do really badly, they play this whole thing like, oh, well, it's because we need more funding and we need more training and we need body cams and we need technology and we need, support staff and all of these things. So like it's this really annoying situation that we're caught in, where no matter what, whether we criticize the police or praise the police, they are somehow able to use the mechanisms of media or local governments in order to get more funding. So this research is coming out of Carleton University, Queen's University, and University of Toronto. The advocacy organizations involved include the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Now, Alexander McClelland, who is part of Carleton Criminology and is involved in this project, says that these can't be very easily explained, these findings. For example, the Tracking Injustice database does not contain the identities of more than half of the people it lists as having been killed during deadly police interactions in 2022. So in even half of these incidents, they don't know who it is, or they don't understand like the intersectional identity of the people who have been killed. Partly because police have not done a fantastic job of collecting that data, which is super disappointing because obviously that's really important. Currently, there is no government body in Canada that tracks killings involving police nationwide. The lack of data prevents researchers, policymakers, advocates, and communities most impacted by police violence from answering basic questions about police use of force. Exactly. So it did find that 700 documented police use of force deaths in Canada have occurred since the year 2000. Black and Indigenous people accounted for 27% of those deaths, according to the data, but the lack of race statistics means the real percentage could be much, much higher. And just to put that into context, Black people make up 4.3% of Canada's population, and Indigenous people make up 5% of Canada's population, according to the most recent census. So keeping in mind that that 27% is skewed, and Black and Indigenous people make up less than 10% of the total population, that is like 3 times the amount, kind of like disproportionate killings from the hands of police for those communities. Really, really egregious. The group says roughly 3/4 of the fatalities it has documented are the result of shootings, specifically police shootings. So obviously, we were all there. We all witnessed history in the making when the Black Lives Matter movement was popular in the wake of George Floyd's death. So what the study has found is that much of these much of these concerns that were raised as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement were largely performative, and nothing has changed. So, I mean, this is what we already know. Scott Mills, from a spokesperson from the Ontario Provincial Police Association, here is doing a little bit of cover work, I guess, saying that police officers don't go to work wanting to get into a fight or shoot or kill somebody. Police officers do not want confrontations like that. The public is calling us to these incidents. So basically he's saying, hey, it's not our fault that we're killing you. It's the public's fault. It's your fault that we're killing you. So, stop doing bad things and we'll stop killing you, which is such a stupid approach to the whole thing. This person honestly just probably should be fired from their job, because they don't understand that this is a systemic problem. And when these when data like this is coming out and showing an increase in police killings, we need a systemic solution. And it's not really just about these individual incidents. Of course, there are some incidents where people need to justifiably be killed. For example, if they're involved in a mass killing, then yes, there probably are cases where they should be killed. However, even in the case of the Miles Sanderson, who died at the hands of Saskatchewan police for after stabbing 11 people, the causes of how that person died have yet to be released. And I think it's very important when we're looking at this through an intersectional lens. This is Miles Sanderson, an Indigenous person, a First Nations person who is, potentially going on this killing spree as a result of colonial harm that has been done to him and his people. These are other systemic problems that we have, and we still don't know why this person was killed or how they died at the hands of police. Very suspicious, right? So there's a lot to take in, because yes, as this article says, and this article making me think that it favors police killings because they're listing all of these incidents of people justifiably being killed at the hands of police, but there are also so many incidents. It can only name like a handful of incidents where the killings were justified, but there are so many incidents, 700 since 2000. And if you think that some of those incidents could have been avoided, absolutely. I'm sure the majority of those situations could have been avoided. Could have avoided killing those people. Another story here. This is in Ontario. A non-binary person says that OHIP discriminated against him, denying coverage for phalloplasty surgery. So this is actually really interesting, kind of having to do with our bodily autonomy as citizens of Ontario, citizens of Canada. So this person, Nathaniel LeMay, is a 41-year-old Ottawa public servant, identifies as transmasculine non-binary. He is seeking phalloplasty, which is the surgical construction of the phallus. So the Ontario's Ministry of Health told Mr. LeMay that OHIP does not fund phalloplasty unless it is performed alongside several other procedures, including vaginectomy, which removes the vagina. And in addition to getting a vaginectomy, you also require a prior hysterectomy. So Mr. LeMay is insisting here that there's no reason they don't want a vaginectomy. they don't want a hysterectomy. Those procedures are much more risky than simply getting a phalloplasty, and there's no reason that you should have to do two risky surgeries in order to get a third surgery. So this is raising a lot of questions about kind of like individual choice and gender affirming surgical processes. So a lot of people are weighing in here, such as Devin O'Brien Kuhn, an associate surgeon specializing in gender affirming surgery at Boston's Brigham and Women's Hospital, who has been performing standalone phalloplasty since 2017. Right now, there is no medical reason that would necessitate pairing all phalloplasty procedures with vaginectomy, according to that surgeon. He added that the medical risk of vaginectomy, a big surgery, actually outweighs those of standalone phalloplasty. If someone is saying, I don't want an organ removed, from an ethical standpoint, you really have to give that some weight, said Dr. O'Brien Kuhn, who is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. If you don't have a surgical reason why you need to remove a vagina, I don't see an ethical rationale for pushing that on somebody just because this is the full package. Yeah, it's actually a really ridiculous idea. Like, no, if you want that surgery covered, actually you need to get like two other surgeries. We only offer this as part of like a three surgery deal. So there's another doctor here saying that even from a cost efficient standpoint, obviously it's going to be cheaper to just do one surgery than it is to do three surgeries. So when you think about dollars and cents, it doesn't make sense. This would cost less money and require less surgeries for an individual person. So yeah, if you had the choice between doing three surgeries or doing one surgery in order to feel as though your gender is affirmed, why wouldn't you just choose the one? And yeah, there's the mental health aspect as well. So I mean, I guess it's great that this is making news. It's great that hopefully this can get changed, and it will change the way that people can seek out gender affirming surgery in Canada. So it's an interesting story. Last story of the day: Google tests blocking of news sites in response to Canada's online news bill. So obviously, this is raising a lot of concerns about how we get our news and whether Google is censoring us or just creating an additional roadblock in how we choose to access news. Personally, I get the newspaper delivered, so I don't need Google really to get my news. Although, I myself, like almost everyone, uses Google in order to search for some news, because I don't get all my news just from one place. And on days like today, when the newspaper doesn't get delivered because it's a snowstorm, then, maybe I am going to be less educated about what's going on in Canada. So Google is testing new ways of blocking Canadians' access to news websites in response to the federal government's online news bill, which is Bill C-18, I believe, which would force the company and other tech giants to compensate news organizations for using their work. So this is just really like petty behavior from Google. I have mixed feelings about Bill C-18. But at the end of the day, I think that charging big tech additional money and essentially taxing big tech in order to keep some of our more traditional news services funded is not really the worst idea, but I do have almost equal amounts of hatred for both big tech and mainstream media. However, I find mainstream media to be something that is useful, and I do believe in making sure that everybody has access to it. Wink, wink. Globe and Mail, maybe if you start charging Google money for sharing your links, you should drop the paywall to your site, because I think paywalling access to good quality news is a reason that we have disinformation here in Canada. People can access misinformation and disinformation easier than they can access accurate and reliable news. So definitely, maybe instead of complaining about Google right now, you should consider that if you're getting this additional funding, you should lower the paywall, if not drop it all the way to the ground. So anyways, this is coming out of a spokesperson for Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez, who is condemning this move. So Laura Scafati is accusing Google of imitating Facebook, which in October said it would not rule out blocking Canadians' access to news if the online news legislation known as Bill C-18 passes without changes. Now, again, mixed feelings about this, but I do hope that in this case, the government kind of like stands its ground. I don't want to see big tech directly influence the laws that are being passed in Canada, just by simply like tweaking their algorithm a little bit. I think that is absolutely BS. If they have that power to influence our laws just by changing the way that we access their services, then I say, it's time to play hardball and double down. So it is disappointing to hear that Google seems to be borrowing from the Facebook's playbook. I said the Facebook, haha. This didn't work in Australia and it won't work here because Canadians won't be intimidated, Ms. Scafati said. At the end of the day, all we're asking is tech giants to do is compensate journalists when they use their work. So, it does create this kind of like debate about like what does it mean to like make a meme that's shared online or to create a tweet for a like, should I be getting paid for the content that I create? Some social media services offer that and others don't. So I think in this case, since there is a direct link between like journalism and social media, then you know what? Why not? We need better journalism in Canada. However, Google and Facebook and these other big tech giants, they will say that like, well, we're supporting journalism in other ways. We're doing other initiatives that support journalism, but I say, why not do both? The other thing that they say is that, this is going to benefit the bigger news outlets like CBC and Globe and Mail and, Post Media. And to which I say, well, that is ridiculous. Like, you're literally Google. You're literally Google. You're literally Facebook. You're literally believe in capitalism. You believe in having a monopoly on these services. You believe in being so big that there are no other alternatives but to use your services. I would even say, like, why don't we nationalize these big tech services? If having a telephone is part of our public utility, why should not the internet be part of our public utility? Why should not access to Google Docs be not part of our public utility? So I don't know. I just feel like letting big tech govern how we pass our laws in Canada would be a really bad precedent to set. So in a way, I feel like the government cannot back down on this front, because that would set a precedent where Facebook and Google and other big tech companies feel as though that they can bully our governments and Canadians into influencing the law. So this lastly is saying there has been a significant decline in ad revenue going to Canadian newspapers, and almost all of it goes to Meta and Google. Mr. Housefather, who is a MP, I honestly can't believe there's an MP named Housefather. It's just like, wow. C-18 is an attempt to level the playing field and protect Canadian journalism. So the other thing is, though, that let's be real here. The ad revenue for big tech companies like Facebook and Google is also going down. Just because people are becoming a little more internet savvy, people have ad blockers. I mean, I do. So like the ad revenue is going down across the board. However, I think I believe in traditional media, and I think it's worth preserving. The way that I personally choose to get my news via physical newspaper, I feel like in a way is superior to getting your news online, because it's not as sensationalized and it is put in the context of other stories. New media, the internet doesn't do that. Unfortunately, sometimes the worst the worst journalism rises to the top because that's what the most people are talking about, how bad the journalism is, or the most sensational headline is going to get the most clicks. So I just hope that we can preserve Canadian journalism as well. Ribbert in chat is asking, how will this impact small local media? Now I know Google at least has done some initiatives to try to help support local media, but I mean that is an answer I think that we have to figure out beyond this particular incident. This is something that the government should be addressing on its own. It's not enough to have all of these news conglomerates that are in struggling on their own. I really love to see independent local media like student newspapers, like we have a couple independent ones here in Peterborough, Ontario, that are really great. um it's important to fund those as well, and I think there is some responsibility for us as citizens to donate to those causes. So if you're listening from Peterborough, Ontario, then I think you can donate some money to the independent student newspaper, the Arthur, or you can support Peterborough Currents, or you can support Kawartha Now. Those are all independent news outlets, and I'm sure if you are living in other Canadian cities, you know which ones that need your support. I also think that of course, those are things that should be getting funding from these link taxes. That if you're sharing those online, then some of that money that is generated in ad revenue for Google we should be making sure that those are getting back to the local media sources. So, all right, that's all for today. We're gonna keep streaming here on Twitch, but that's all for you folks on YouTube in terms of our daily news roundup. Thank you so much. If you made it this far, which is really far, because I always talk too much, please subscribe. It really helps our channel out. We're slowly creeping towards our goal of 1,000 subscribers. We are at 213. Feels like we get one every day. You could be the one. You could be the one helping us out today. And you could do it for free just by clicking subscribe or leaving a comment or a like on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.